behind me. I'm such a
Is that your cat?
All right. It was my cat. I didn't take the picture. You know what? I'm going to make sure it's in the... There we go.
I think... Yeah, there we are. All right. So I think things are warming up and we're live here. And we're talking about Brooke's cat. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. It's been a minute. Tina-Desiree Berg here reporting for Status Coup News. Today is Tuesday, 7/16/2024. There's lots to talk about today. And with me is Brooke B. Welcome, Brooke, my favorite disinformation reporter. You often cover right-wing extremism. So I wanted to have you join me today to talk about Trump's VP pick, J.D. Vance. A lot to talk about there. This is a guy, obviously, who has sold himself as being a man of the people. In reality, he is an ex-venture capitalist. He holds some incredibly extreme positions on lots of things. We're going to go over some of those. But I wanted to open the show with a clip of R. Lewis confronting J.D. Vance when he was reporting on the ground in Ohio on the crisis in East Palestine. So let's play that clip.
I think anyone should be held criminally liable for the decision to detonate those cars. A resident I've been speaking with said that they spoke with the former Vice President Al Gore at one point, who thinks that something could be criminal there. But the ultimate decision to detonate the cars seems like it was unnecessary.
Well, the NTSB report is going to come out soon. One thing I'd say, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is it's really important that we not have a federal settlement with Norfolk Southern before the NTSB report. It's like, why would you try to memory hole and prevent discovery on an accident before you even have the accident report?
Right.
Look, we'll see what the NTSB report says. My strong suspicion is there were a lot of mistakes. Whether they're criminal mistakes, I got to see more evidence before I can say that. See you guys.
Thank you.
So, I mean, this is typical J.D. Vance, right? He wants to come off as being a man of the people. I'm here for the people. We clearly know that that's not the case. Kind of dotting the questions here. Typical. It's also really hot in my studio right now because climate change. But let's talk about J.D. Vance's background for a minute. Not just in relationship with Project 2025, which is getting, a lot of attention right now. But in his early days, he wrote this book called Hillbilly Eulogy that sort of was, sort of made him seem like an everyman's kind of guy, even though he was a venture capitalist. And a lot of liberals also embraced this book. I believe, who was it that made the movie? There was a movie made about
Ron Howard, I think. Wasn't it
Ron Howard? That's right. It was Ron Howard. So there you go. I think Oprah had, promoted it on her book club. So, there was some love there coming on from the liberal side. So, but this guy in reality is pretty dangerous. What are your thoughts just opening on that?
Okay, well, first of all, I don't understand how anybody could get through that book. I don't mean to be. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I totally mean to be. Look, I just wrote a book, so I understand. You put yourself out there. Like, my book might suck. I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying I just wrote one. I don't have it out or anything. It's just been written. So, I know you put a whole lot of yourself in there to write a book. And everything about J.D. Vance that he put of himself in this book sucks. The book is terrible. It's I don't know how people read it and didn't detect the contempt for the impoverished, right. people that just ran rampant through it. I didn't actually finish the book, so I should probably put that caveat in now. I couldn't do it. I was like, I wonder what this book is that everybody's talking about. And then I was like, God, this book is terrible. This happens to me all the time because I'm a snob. But in this case, it served me very well. It just seemed like what it seemed to me was as if he was writing it for the white gaze, basically. He was helping people justify their own contempt for people who are, quote, like him, which I don't think they were. I don't know very much about his early life growing up in poverty.
He talks about it in the book. Let's talk about it for a second. He was mainly, he says, raised by his grandparents, right? So they were poor. His parents, I believe, were teenagers when they had him, so quite young. So I think he sort of leans on coming from a poor background, coming from young parents that weren't married when he was born originally. They ended up getting married. So he sort of leans on some of these points that a lot of people on the identity politics side of the spectrum are going to be able to identify with. I think that's the point of what he's doing. But I think you're right. There's also a certain amount of contempt that is being shown towards poverty at the same time if you get into the weeds and read between the lines of what he's saying.
I went back and tried to read it again, which I couldn't do. So, I still don't know how it ends. I never will. And I've never seen the movie. But when I read it, even from the jacket copy, there was a sort of, the undercurrent is still about white birth rates and about there's still like a white supremacist, undercurrent to it. Even back then, when it was kind of it was the cool thing. And
because I think, hang on, let me stop you, because I think the main thrust or the thesis of what he's getting at is that you should be able to blame the circumstances you are in if you're poor, right? Like, it's not the government's fault that you can't get a leg up. You need to be more accountable and responsible for that. So he doesn't really want to look at income inequality in the country and address it. He doesn't think that, at least this is the takeaway I have, that he doesn't want to address that he doesn't see it as a driving force for anything. And that does come across as white gazing, as you're saying.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's just sort of the bootstraps mentality, which, God, I grew up without any money. I don't have any money now. I'm a journalist, I've never had any money. And to hear that sort of bootstraps thing where, when I see my own ideas getting stolen by men who then go on to make millions, and I know how much my own ideas are worth, not to make it about me, but, when that happens, which has happened multiple times throughout my career, and I know I'm not the only woman who has had this done to her, not even the only one in my field has had this done to her, right? But when I see that happen, I'm just like, bootstraps are total BS. I'm trying not to swear. Can I swear? I can never remember.
You can swear.
Oh, good. Bootstraps are total bullshit. I probably I just, like, that mentality, like, I do understand. There's helping yourself, and there's like, I'm a big, I do get a little right-wing about this, because I'm just like, everybody who wants a career needs to have a career, and they need to, like all that. But that's not, I don't think that, like, they need to work in order to be allowed to live. I don't think that that's the case. I just think that people who want a career should have one, and they should be able to pursue it.
I don't think that that's a right wing viewpoint.
I don't know anymore.
So, I mean, whatever makes you happy, man. So I want to talk a little bit about his venture capitalist career. So that, I think, gets overlooked, his connections to Peter Thiel, who is a very, very wealthy billionaire. Peter Thiel is definitely anti-government as far as I'm concerned. I think he self-identifies as an anarcho-capitalist. This is a guy who helped fund and start Palantir, PayPal obviously as well, but, security state kind of stuff. And at the same time, he's argued that corporations should, for example, seastead. They should set up their corporations off the shoreline, because then you can get out of all the government legislation that controls, how you treat workers and everything else. So this guy is like, the villain version of extreme libertarianism, in my opinion. Most notably, he sued Gawker out of business over, if you guys don't know the story, you can kind of look it up, but he didn't like something that was reported on about him, so he funded a lawsuit against Gawker that was being brought by Hulk Hogan and his penis, and it's this wild fucking story. I don't want to get into it today, but if you don't know the story, please look it up. It's wild stuff. Point being that he was perfectly, out of vengeance, he wanted to take down a news site. And my thing is this, is like, even if you disagree with what that news site is publishing, that's a dangerous game, right? Suing somebody out of business because I'm a wealthy guy and I can do it simply because I don't like what they said about me. Don't tell me you're a First Amendment absolutist. You're not. But this is sort of the tensions that you see, within Peter Thiel. So I want to bring up this article because it's Fortune magazine of all places. And it's talking about the nominee J.D. Vance's connections to, hang on. Oh, man, now there's a paywall.
Oh, no.
Okay, but Colin, you have it up. I can probably scroll down on yours. I hate it when they do this. You get 3 free articles and it's all the same article. You used it all in one day. All right, let's scroll down with Colin's version of this, and then we can go from there. So, thank you. Vance is the first former venture capitalist on a major party ticket since Mitt Romney, who lost the presidential race to Barack Obama. Apparently, we're going to have to go back to that. Wait, go back to the top. Okay, there we go. However, in 2012, Vance's footprint in the VC space, however, is not extensive and mostly tied to his association with his biggest backer, Peter Thiel, who we just talked about a little bit briefly. I also want to talk about Peter Thiel in relationship to Project 2025 in a second, and the Heritage Foundation, because all of these things are connected, right?
Oh, yeah. Always.
Right. So Vance's VC career begins with Thiel, Silicon Valley. Trump's choice drew praise from Elon Musk, because of course it did, as well as Vance's former partner, Colin Greenspoon. Vance and Greenspoon co-founded Cincinnati-based Naira Ventures in 2020. scroll down a little bit. Hang on. I got to look over at the other screen. There's a delay in the live stream, and I'm looking at this one. All right. So while we are sad to see him move on from Naira in 2022, it was bittersweet because we knew he had a higher calling to serve our country, and today's news only further cements his position as an American leader. A former Marine and Yale School graduate, again, Yale School graduate, this is an elitist school, I'm sorry, but it is. If you get into Yale, you either have, wealthy parents, legacy that's helping you get in there, or you have the money to be able to afford it, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so a former Marine and Yale School graduate, Vance started his VC career as a junior investor at Mithril Capital, a Silicon Valley firm founded by Peter Thiel. In 2017, following a 2-year stint, he joined Revolution, a Washington, D.C. based firm co-founded by former AOL chairman Steve Case. Vance served as a managing partner of Revolution's Rise of the Rest seed fund, a $150 million early stage fund aimed at supporting startups outside traditional VC ecosystems like Silicon Valley, New York, and Massachusetts. He was, all right, that's the tweet. Let's scroll up. Vance and Greenspan then struck out on their own to co-found Naira, raising over $93 million from several big-name investors, including Thiel and former Google CEO Eric Schmidt. The firm was an early backer of AppHarvest, a Kentucky-based indoor tomato grower. That was random. I didn't know that.
Oh, I remember that. It was very strange. I was wondering why it got so much press. Sorry.
Yeah. The only board Vance served on as a venture capitalist per Axios Dan Primac. AppHarvest went bankrupt in 2023. Anyway, on and on. So this guy has deep ties in with the billionaire class in this country, in venture capitalism. So why are people so willing to accept him, or at least some people, obviously not everybody, as kind of an everyman kind of guy? Like,
because he can buy good PR, I assume, and because he's white, and because he occasionally says populist type things that's it. That's enough, I guess. It's very frustrating, actually, because you can just say anything. You can say anything, and if you're a white guy who has a sufficient amount of money, it gets printed as fact. He's not the only one by a long shot.
So by populist, we don't mean, it's this sort of right-wing populism that he's making an appeal to, I think. I think you're right about that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It drives me nuts when people use populism in that way, and I'm doing it now too. He's an attempted man of the people. He's trying to say the things that he thinks the little people want to hear. And sometimes he's right about us little people, but most of the time the contempt sort of comes through. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's all right. No, not at all. So connecting to Project 2025 and Heritage Foundation, how does this all tie in with Vance and Peter Thiel?
Well, Vance is actually the heritage pick, or a heritage pick. I don't know if he's the only one, but he's definitely up there. They've been championing him for years, since at least 2017. I found some stuff going back to 2017 last night, and then I got mad about the whole thing and stopped looking. So it could be earlier than that. But they publish op-eds of his. They have recommended him for things. They give him a rating of 93% out of 100. They think he's a great guy. And Vance and Thiel and I don't know, Sachs, the OpenAI crowd, they have all been championing him as well. And those are the people who I'm thinking of when I talk about the Tantan Heritage Network, which is a network of disinformation and propaganda and dark money groups and nonprofits that, originally coalesced around the border, but have sort of
immigration rights. So by border, you mean, yeah.
Sorry, that's what I mean.
That's all right.
And have since sort of metastasized. They've sort of come for all of us, which is kind of what in the beginning, when they were just border, related, mostly border related, or immigration related, I should say. I said, they're going to come for all of us real soon if we don't pay attention, and nobody paid attention, or a few people paid attention, and now they've come for us all. And they've somehow along the way merged with the Heritage Foundation's networks as well. I don't know when or how, but I assume that it has something to do with Leonard Leo, who is the money guy at the center.
We're going to talk about it. Definitely does. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So, carry on.
What's important to know about these networks is that the Tantan network, and specifically because I've done so much research on that particular network, which has been subsumed by Heritage at this point. But I'm going to talk about Tantan right now. They are an explicitly eugenicist network. Everything they do is to support
You're talking about John Tanton. So
yes.
For folks that don't know, John Tanton, yes, he is a eugenicist. He's no longer with us, but his legacy, he croaked. His legacy is political action committees that are very much devoted to, in the very least, ending immigration, period. Not just illegal immigration, all immigration. It's a group that's argued about literally overturning the 14th Amendment. So just to give you an idea, it's definitely an extremist organization.
Yes.
And it's FAIR is one of them. Numbers USA is another one. So
nice.
Just for people that don't have a background that know this.
And Center for Immigration Studies, but they have like 95 groups. And that's just Tanton. And again, I'm saying this about Tanton and Heritage, but because I've done the bulk of my research on the Tanton network in particular, I'm talking about this, but it applies to like the entire network, right? So what they are, again, explicitly eugenicist. And so they focus on birth rates, they focus on reproduction, they focus on abortion, as well as immigration, because what they want is a white majority ruling over an ethnic minority. Or probably they wouldn't care if it was a white minority ruling over an ethnic majority, right? A non-white majority. Like South Africa, like they're big fans of the sort of thing that was going on in South Africa during apartheid.
Yeah,
the same deal. So everything in Project 2025 appears to have been written with that in mind. So if you look at that, it comes through. And like, for example, the obsession with trans people, that's an obsession with genitals. I hate the word genitals now because I've heard it so many times from people who hate trans people, right? They're like, genitals, penis. And I'm like, God, shut up. But
I feel you.
Oh my God, so many penises. I mean, so much talking about penises. But that kind of obsession is promulgated by people who want you to fixate on birth rates and birthright and the white birth rate, for example. So that's all of it is geared toward that.
That's right.
And inherent, along with trying to take over the federal government, destroy our institutions, and
that's where really white replacement theory comes from, isn't it? It's there's fewer white babies being born. They're going to replace. I mean, all of this is grounded in that.
It's so exhausting. I hate that I'm still talking about these people. They're so exhausting.
Well, because they've grown. This is a group that's been around for decades, has influence for decades now, but they've grown in popularity because they were given a platform under Donald Trump. I mean, that's just how it is. And here we are, sort of revisiting all of these themes that never entirely went away during Biden's administration, but they're here again in a way that's, I don't know. I think it's worse.
Yeah, in some ways it's worse. It's definitely more intense.
More intense.
On my good days, I think it's because they know that this is sort of like the last chance they're going to get, to grab up power and for a long time. On my bad days, I won't tell you what I think on my bad days because it's real doomery. And for now, I still have more good days than bad days. So, there's that. But that takes a lot of, trying to think it through and maybe some edibles. I didn't say that. But yeah, so all of this to say, Heritage's guy, that's what Heritage wants, right? Yeah. Heritage's guy, or one of their guys, is J.D. Vance and has been since, again, at least 2017, probably longer. I haven't been paying that much attention anymore because these people are exhausting. As far as Peter Thiel goes, by the way, here in San Diego, where I live, I was a border reporter. I spent a lot of time at the U.S.-Mexico border, and his surveillance technology is all over the border. It is disgusting. Palantirs and Andurils and all the rest of the Tolkien names are everywhere. If they're in the desert, they're at the crossings. Like you have information attached to your name wherever you go. They're sharing intel with the Mexican government. Like it's really ugly. For vulnerable people, for journalists who want to cover vulnerable people, for people, for refugees and asylum seekers, it's already really, really bad here, especially if they're refugees and asylum seekers of color. Like the stories have curled my hair over the years. My hair is now curly. Well, okay, it's curlier than it used to be because of these stories that I've heard. And this is the guy that Heritage wants. And I can't bang pots and pans about that enough. It's just sort of proof of the stuff I've been saying all along. This is a Trump presidency would be a Heritage Foundation presidency, and that would probably be the last presidency we see in our lifetimes. Or the only presidency, I should say.
I got you.
Then we'll get pro tem President Mike Thomas for 20 years, or Mike Johnson for 20 years.
Let's talk about that for a second. One of the things, before I move on to the next thing, Peter Thiel funded J.D. Vance's Senate run, like millions and millions of dollars. So obviously that was somebody that he wanted in office. Why do you think that is? Where's Peter Thiel's mind? Because, and let me bring this up before I move on to the next thing. JD Vance didn't like Trump initially, right? So this has gotten a lot of reporting in the last news cycle that at one time JD Vance was calling Trump an idiot, was not okay with a lot of the things he was saying. So the question is did Peter Thiel motivate that flip-flop with JD Vance? Was that flip-flop already going to happen? Was disingenuous? Or is there something else going on here? What are your thoughts there?
I just assume everything they say is in bad faith. I look at what they do, not what they say. And
fair.
Plenty of people said that about Trump, Marco Rubio, and now they just suck up to him every chance they get. So who knows what their cause is? I just always assume.
It could simply be proximity to power. I think
it's bootlicking. I think it's all just bootlickery and hierarchical thinking. Authoritarians can't help but grab for power. Like that's just who they are and what they do. So I think that might be just that simple. But I would love to know, like, if there is, so the rational part of me usually wins. I'm like 90% rational and 10% conspiratorial. So the rational part of me is like, yeah, okay. And then the 10% conspiratorial part of me is like, but what if there's something real good brewing? So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
I guess we'll see. One of the things that they were saying about JD Vance this morning, the GOP meeting, was they were putting out like, this is a guy that should be able to appeal to women, blah, 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 blah. I find that, I'm glad you're laughing because I found that laughable too. I mean, this guy is obviously anti-abortion, anti-women's rights. But I want to pull this quote out that he had stated. This was, when was this, an interview, I think, with George Stephanopoulos. I can never say his name.
Yeah.
Right. So this is what JD Vance said. This is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is the idea that, like, well, okay, these marriages were fundamentally, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy. And so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear, what's going to make people happier in the long term? I don't know, JD Vance. You think women getting beaten is going to make them happier in the long term? What are you saying here?
We're just women. Yeah, like they think this is what they think will appeal to women. That just shows how out of touch the Republican Party is. Like deeply, horrendously. Like I'll go after the Democratic Party for being out of touch.
Well, we'll do that in the next half.
Okay, I can help with that. But this is just like, they think it's 1954 and they think it's white suburbia, USA, circa 1954. That's what they want. That's what they think it is. They think everything will be fine when they have that. And they're approaching it as though that has already happened. And there's, that guy is not, oh my God, I can't believe they think that women will fall for that nonsense. I grew up around a lot of terrible Gen X, boys at the time who became men, and they all sounded just like this. They'd all be like, if you have a kid out of wedlock, you might as well kiss your marriageability goodbye. And I'd be like, okay. And they'd be like, what was another one? Somebody said
it was 90s. Yeah, that was bad. It was 90s. Bad. You don't have to remind me. That was bad.
Terrible time to be a woman. I got run out
I'm Gen X too, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you get it. I forget. I always think you're younger than I am.
No, I think I'm older than you are.
I have a couple of years. You look great. Yeah, I'm convinced I'm 28 still, which is a horrible thing.
That's hilarious. The other thing, Brooke, that I find incredibly disturbing about where JD Vance is coming from has to do with the 2020 election. This is a guy that basically said that he's not Mike Pence. He would have done the opposite of Mike Pence. He basically said there should be multiple election slates, that he wouldn't have done what Mike Pence did, et cetera, et cetera. Like, that is kind of scary. This is a guy, so if we are in that, position again, he would support a coup, so to speak. This is what let me say what he said. Let me read this quote. If I had been vice president, I would have told the states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and so many others that we needed to have multiple slates of electors. And I think the U.S. Congress should have fought over it from there. He continued that this is the legitimate way to deal with an election that a lot of folks, including me, think had a lot of problems in 2020. I think that's what we should have done.
Okay, what? Okay.
To me, this is, honestly, I'll be frank with you, this right here might be the most disturbing thing about JD Vance.
I think I know why now, what happened with Trump and why he's the pick. I mean, I think I get it now.
So he went from calling Trump an idiot to this in a period of a very short period of a couple years, basically.
Well, so did a lot of people, and it's gross, and I hate it. It makes me very sad. But yeah, that is extremely scary, and it is actually very telling. Makes a lot of sense. By the way, I'd totally forgotten he said that. Like, I was going through some files from 2023 just before this, because I was like, I'm going to look through all my old stuff and see what I can find. And I found some stuff that I could have sworn was in 2016 or 2017 that was just like last May. And I'm like, no, that happened. That had
yeah, I know.
So my sense
kind
of
of scary.
It's terrifying. My sense of time
terrifying.
is gone. But yeah, so there you go. I mean, he would happily subvert the democratic process for Trump or for power or whatever. And that is probably his draw. And he sees Trump now probably as a way to be able to do so. I mean, he's never made a secret. Well, I don't think he's ever made a secret of the fact that he's just, nakedly thirsty for power. Vance, that is. Trump, obviously, as well. But
I think if you're a venture capitalist, that kind of goes with the territory, to be frank.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. These rich people who think that they're the puppet masters or the chess masters of society are really starting to grind my gears. I mean,
yeah. So wildly, I also want to bring this up. J.D. Vance's wife, he's in a biracial relation or marriage, I should say, not relationship. But his wife clerked for Brett Kavanaugh, of all people. So there's that element. But also, I'm noticing in nationalist white supremacist world, people are kind of angry about J.D. Vance being the Trump nominee because they think he is a traitor for being married to somebody that's not white, even though he's saying all these white. I've actually read these posts. I don't know. They're floating out there in the nationalist world. So there's that angle as well. Do you think this is a net negative or a net positive for the Trump campaign to have J.D. Vance? I mean, so on one end, he probably gets more money coming into his campaign. Peter Thiel had said previously that he was not going to donate to any presidential campaigns in 2024. I think this might change that. That remains to be seen, but it's possible. I do think it is an appeal to, the wealthy elites in the country. But what are your thoughts?
So I actually don't understand why white supremacists are suddenly now deciding that racial purity is what they want, considering, I mean, I know they're white supremacists. I mean, they're not like the brainiacs or the luminaries of the world. They are very comfortable with saying one thing, one day and saying something totally different the next day, because what they're looking for isn't really cohesion or society building or anything like that. What they want is permission to hurt and kill people and to do terrible things to people. They want to be able to do disgusting things to kids with impunity because those kids aren't white. I mean, we know what they're about. But I'm actually pretty shocked that that's something that they're even bringing up, considering how many white supremacists or crypto white supremacists have turned up with wives, in particular, not husbands, but wives who aren't white.
I mean, I'll read this one from one of the big nationalist channels on Telegram. More disturbing than his anti-Trump comments are Vance's big tech ties and race mixing. Peter Thiel owns Vance. Thiel donated $10 million to Vance's Senate campaign. Vance's companies were funded by Jews like Eric Schmidt. And Vance has a Pagete wife and kid named Vivek. Red flags. I mean, so this is the kind of things that they're saying. I'm not saying we should give more credence to them than that we do, but I do think it is part of the conversation as these individuals. Go ahead.
I just hope they tear each other apart.
Yeah.
I hope they just go after each other and have a duel at high noon, and maybe they can just have a big little shootout. That would take care of so many societal problems. I think that those types are going to shut up as it gets closer to the election, because they're going to want to see their guy in anyway. But by the way, they're going to start trying to use it as a cudgel, because I've seen this before. They're going to be like, well, how can he be racist if his wife isn't white? Checkmate.
Right.
Right. I've seen that a billion times. So I just want to head that one off at the pass by saying men who hate women marrying women all the time. So,
Yeah, no, it's definitely a possibility. Colin, I want to bring up this political article quickly. Private meeting, billionaires, and a G6 Gulf Stream. The backstory on how Trump picked Vance. Yep, thank you. 2 days before Donald Trump named J.D. Vance as his running mate, the Ohio senator boarded real estate titan Steve Witkoff's J6 Gulfstream jet. His destination, Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach, Florida. The surreptitious meeting, which has not previously been reported on, helped to solidify Trump's decision to pick the 39-year-old freshman senator as his running mate. Trump had spoken with North Dakota Governor Doug Bergman and Florida Senator Marco Rubio, the other two vice presidential contenders, earlier in the week. To those familiar with his deliberations, it was clear he had been the most impressed with Vance. For Trump, the pick represented the selection of an heir apparent to his MAGA movement and the latest stage of a relationship that evolved from Trump's initial skepticism of Vance to his full-on embrace of a poll he now views as a fierce loyalist. The relationship between the two men, detailed by more than a half dozen people close to both of them, began in 2021 when Vance was running for Senate. Vance, who famously documented his blue-collar upbringing in Hillbilly Elegy, had savaged Trump, whom he called noxious and said he loathed during the 2016 campaign. Vance's effort to win Trump involved forging a relationship with Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., who lobbied for him and against Bergman with his father, a crucial visit to East Palestine, Ohio, and his aggressive effort to overcome internal opposition from major Republican donors and Rupert Murdoch-affiliated news outlets. My understanding on the back channel was that Rupert Murdoch wanted Bergman to be the VP. I'm not sure that that's 100% true, but I've read that. And it involved a campaign by Vance and his advisors to convince Trump that Vance could raise money for his presidential run and forcefully defend him on TV. By the time he ran for Senate in 2021, Vance was firmly in the former president's camp, or at least understood the value of a Trump endorsement. Again, I think a lot of that has to do with proximity to power. In the spring of 2021, tech billionaire and Vance ally Peter Thiel brokered a meeting between Trump and Vance. During the meeting, which was also attended by Thiel and Trump Jr., Vance highlighted his and Trump's shared populist, there's that word again, viewpoints. And again, I wish, I got to say this just as a sidebar, I wish people would stop using this word populist this way. There are other words we could use here that would be far more descriptive and accurate. This viewpoint that these guys are like FDR champions. They're not. It's let's blame all the immigrants and black and brown folks for why white people make less money. That is what their viewpoint of populism is, right? So it's got nothing to do with any genuine populist point of view. That's just me being a sidebar there. Okay, so Trump, meanwhile, had told close allies he was impressed by Vance, complimenting him on everything from his debate performances to his physical appearance and his golf swing. Important stuff here, Brooke. The image-focused Trump saw Vance as telegenic and powerful communicator, right? All right, so I want to go down to this part because it's a longer article. The East Palestine part. Trump advisors later described the East Palestine visit as a critical moment in his presidential campaign. Trump's launch had been rocky. His November 2022 announcement was so tepid that rather than scare competitors off, they sensed an opening. Then, soon after Trump dined with the rapper and Nazi sympathizer Ye, formerly Kanye West, and Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes, and he posted on social media that he supported terminating the Constitution, both of which drew intense criticism. Trump's trip to the hardscrabble northeastern Ohio village served to remind Republicans of the, again, there's that word, populist image he had cultivated as president, helping staunch the bleeding. We spent a lot of time reporting on what was happening in East Palestine, and there was definitely, again, this is why I take aim at his book. He doesn't want to actually address the fact that income inequality is the main driver of all of this anger. That should not be a controversial statement. It shouldn't be. When people cannot make a living, they can't have a decent quality of life if they work, full time. They're going to get angry, and rightfully so, especially when they see ultra rich people getting richer at their expense, right? And they see less protections for workers and whatnot. So there's two routes that could ultimately go. One route is that you join a union, you support leftist sort of outlooks, but the left hasn't really offered an exit to the income inequality. I think that's partially why where we're at. So that's left this gaping hole for a quote unquote phony populist like Donald Trump to come in and make this case. And when you have J.D. Vance basically arguing pull yourself up by your bootstraps, income inequality isn't the problem here. It's just that you aren't taking advantage of what's around you, which is kind of ludicrous. When you're able to sell people on that idea, it kind of, sort of takes hold and grows, then we end up, I think, where we are here today, right? So I think it's wild that they are naming East Palestine as a turning point for this, because it could have gone the other way, right? And you had white nationalist groups there in East Palestine try to do recruitment too. You had Proud Boys there. You had White Lives Matter. We had, what's his name? Ohio Blood Tribe guy. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but you get the point. So, they all know that this is fertile ground for political campaigning. It's fertile ground to get people to join your movements. And the left has not been filling that gap, but the right has been, right? And they've been selling people on this messaging. So I think it's a very dangerous position we're in. I think J.D. Vance is a terrible VP pick for the country, but it's a great pick for Trump in this, Project 2025 movement, MAGA movement.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I'm still kicking myself for using the term populist. I hate that I've just started, because I used to be just like you. I'd be like, oh, no, this is not how you use the term. And now I'm doing it.
It's fine. No, I mean, I get what you mean. I mean, right-wing populism, saying that, I get it. But I just feel like when you're writing an article and you have time to really think through what you're saying here, what are we really saying here when we say populist in this article? We're saying it's making appeal, to sort of white nationalist rhetoric, white replacement theory.
Yep.
That you're angry that you don't have a decent instead of blaming the actual billionaires. Of course, J.D. Vance is going to obscure that. Of course, Trump is going to obscure that. They're both part of the elitist group. They're both very wealthy men. They are part of the elite ruling class, even though they keep telling people that they're not, which is wild that's just saying. Anyway.
I mean, he's not going to piss off the venture capitalists by saying the rich people are the problem, and the way they treat the country like it's their own personal chess game, and they think they're chess grandmasters when they haven't even taken a sociology class and probably wouldn't understand it if they had. I mean, it's just so frustrating to me to see that this is what they're trying to do with all their money.
Exactly.
I think we should, tax them into oblivion, but nobody's listening to me right now, so I guess we just got to live this way for a while. But yeah, I mean,
I'm listening to you.
Thank you, and I know that people are listening. I got to stop saying that. I'm starting to get sick of myself, actually. I'm just like, nobody listened, but Jesus Christ, it's been a long 10 years. I used to have much younger eyes. Yeah.
I would say, before I move off of this, I want to read a second part of this quote because I think it's meaningful too. So Vance also went on to say that Trump should replace every civil servant in the administrative state. This is right. So these are people that, these are just civil servants working at, whatever place that they're at. And they're not supposed to be loyal to any political party or president. That's not why they're there. I think replacing all of these people with sycophants is a really bad idea. We can get into that another day because that's a longer constitution. But I think that we need to talk about the fact that he thinks that that's, what we should do. He went on to say, we have a major problem here with administrators and bureaucrats in the government who don't respond to the elected branches. If those people aren't following the rules, then of course you've got to fire them. And of course the president has to be able to run the government as he thinks he should. So again, this is that idea that the president is king. And if he says if those people aren't following the rules, they actually are following the rules. Maybe your president doesn't want to follow the rules. What you're saying is following the rules is you're not doing what the president wants you to do. And that's a very dangerous position to be in. All of these things are supposed to be checks and balances to, totalitarian power. And you start to we've seen so much of this eroding away. I mean, SCOTUS is like a complete joke at this point. We should probably table that for another day because that's another hour conversation.
Yeah, that's a rant. I'll just open my mouth and just scream.
All right. So we need to move on to the Democrats, otherwise we'll run out of time. What are your parting thoughts on J.D. Vance?
My parting thoughts on J.D. Vance is that he is not to be trusted, that he is a self-contradictory person, and that he is definitely supporting authoritarianism. That quote where he's saying, oh, well, maybe Trump sounds like Hitler to you, or whatever it was in that story that you just had up, where he's shutting down reporters for saying, hey, Trump's a white supremacist, and then they just let him do it. That's really unnerving. He's been speaking in coded dog whistles and encoded language for years. He's a Heritage favorite. He's a Tanton Network favorite. He's Peter Thiel's favorite. And also his book sucked.
Right. And also, his book sucked. All right, I want to turn now to the effects that the Trump attempted assassination might have on the DNC and where we're headed in that direction. You know, my first thoughts when this happened was, this is bad because naturally every politician in the country is going to come out and say there's no room for political violence, which is what happened. Biden, all of the Democrats did that. I feel like, yes, you're right, there shouldn't be, but I think part of that conversation needs to be the fact that we have a GOP that has been begging for violence for years now, literally saying we should go out and kill the leftists. Like, what I just said is not a controversial statement. There are many examples of this. January 6th was a lot of violence, right? So why is that not being brought into the conversation? If I was a Democratic Party member that was a politician or a member of the DNC in some position right now where I was speaking publicly on this, the first thing I would say is like, political violence is bad, yes, but also let's talk about how the GOP has sort of been pushing for political violence for many years now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Straight up inciting it, promulgating it. I mean, January 6th, we had those courthouse and the state house takeovers in 2020 leading up to January 6th. There were two others January 6th-like events.
Trying to kill the governor in Michigan, attacking Nancy Pelosi's husband. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's been, I believe, 14 right-wingers that have done political shootings and killed leftists in the country in the last several years. So this idea that political violence started with this Trump assassination is nuts. And I also think it's wild. I mean, here's my thoughts on this. So I wasn't sure what to think when I saw this. My first thought, I don't know what yours was, Brooke, was like, is this guy an accelerationist? I'm not going to assume that this is a left-winger that's pissed and wants to stop fascism. That's definitely a possibility. But I'm not going to assume that because we are now in an environment where a lot of accelerationists just want to bring down the government, and it's that simple, and they'll do anything to do that. So it wasn't surprising to me that it turned out this kid was a registered Republican, wanted to join a gun club, and had also given, $15 to some political somebody on Act Blue. Like, I mean, that's like, none of this really gives you a full picture, right?
Right. But yeah, my first thought actually was same as yours, because I've been watching the rhetoric. I've been watching Trump's rhetoric, but I've also been watching the rhetoric escape. Not as hard as I used to, because I'm not getting paid for it anymore. So there's a lot of other things I could be doing now that aren't so corrosive to the insides of my poor brainwormed brain, which is so brainwormed now. But I'm still watching because I want to know know what people are saying. I want to know what's going to happen. And yeah, I mean, my first thought was accelerationist, because I think there's a lot of people who bought fully into the conspiracy theories that were, on the rise in like 2019 and 2020, those manufactured conspiracy theories like QAnon, for example, but not just QAnon, like the Boogaloo Boys and the, oh God, I can't remember who.
No, I got you. I'm with you so far. I'm with you.
All those assholes. So there were a lot of people who were waiting for Trump to do like that one thing. They were waiting for him to do the thing that was going to like destroy the Democrats and all the dissident Jews or whatever,
right.
whatever they were saying. And they kept saying, like, in the case of QAnon, they were like, trust the plan. It's coming. It's part of the plan. And by the time they all figured out it was a grift and started to sort of fragment, they were pissed.
They were angry and they're pissed. So that anger needs a direction to go in, and Trump would be a perfect target for it. So I guess, it remains to be seen what this turns out to be. We don't know yet. This is just my initial thoughts. What I do want to talk with you about, though, is how is this going to affect the presidential election and and how the Democrats respond? Because we've already seen them, do the political flag waving. I think that only serves to help get Trump elected, because it becomes an acknowledgement for there's a very serious problem in the country, and maybe the current guy is not the solution. I just think that some people fall into that for obvious reasons. I also think that, a certain level of patriotism, we saw it with Reagan, right? When there was an attempted assassination against him, that sort of, just kind of turns up in everybody, because it's, oh my gosh, we're going to, so there's many, many ways that this could play out, and I just don't see the Democrats stepping forward and doing anything to sway opinions in this matter. And they could do so without saying political violence is okay. Nobody needs to say that. It's not.
It's driving me
But
crazy.
maybe we should address the fact that the GOP has said for years that political violence absolutely is okay, and they're just pissed that it's one of their guys now.
Yeah, I mean, I would really like that. I would really like to see that. Like, it seems pretty clear that it's going to get, well, not pretty clear. I believe, I should say, that this is going to get, or the Trump campaign, the Trump team is going to try to memory hole this, because the implications of a right-wing kid who has been, and this is what I'm about to say is controversial. I feel weird saying it, and I'm sorry, because I don't know. I think it's important to say, but I also just hate being the person to say like the really demented shit, you know? But that's been my role.
I'm dying to know what you're going to say now.
No, it's not. I've built it up too much. It's nothing that good. I saw this story on Channel 4, English Channel 4, about how the family of the shooter was targeted in 2016 by the Trump campaign for as a gun owner, as a likely voter. And so they found the family's names in their database. Apparently, they have a 2016 presidential campaign database from the Trump campaign from back then. And okay, on its face, okay, you know, that's kind of just no big deal. But then when you think back to like the Cambridge Analytica scandal and the dark ads and the auto generated groups that Facebook was making that were white supremacist groups, and the content that it was auto creating for white supremacist groups and other extremist groups. You know, when you think about that, and then you think about like the kid who I can never remember his name. I'm sorry, Crooks. When you think about Crooks,
Thomas Crooks. Yeah.
And how he was 20. You know,
so young,
horribly young. You know, heartbreakingly young. Really. I mean, This is a tragedy any way you look at it.
It is a tragedy. It's awful.
But imagine him. So 2016 was what, 8 million years ago?
Yeah.
8 years ago, right? 8 or 9 years ago. So he would have been like 12, right? Starting when this started. So like imagine they're flooding the family's Facebook with these dark ads, and this 12-year-old kid's like marinating in it. I think that's something to look into, and to look into.
Oh, I agree. I'm sure that we'll find that he was in other private chats that aren't public facing necessarily. So I want to read this little bit. This is Reuters that was reporting on this. I want to read a little bit of this just to get some ideas if you agree with some of these opinions. So some Republicans were already agitated by his continued stoking of the fire. Obviously, we're talking about Trump here. If the country wasn't a power keg before, it is now, said Chip Falkel, a Republican operative in South Carolina who was opposed to Trump. Brad Bannon, a Democratic strategist, said the shooting could benefit Trump politically because it feeds into his campaign narrative that the country is off track. I agree with that. The attempted assassination creates sympathy for Trump, Bannon said. It also confirms the idea to voters that something is fundamentally wrong in this nation, which is an idea that drives support for him. And so let me stop there, because this is what I think is really important. Yes, that is true if it's left unchecked. If the DNC checks that notion, gets out in front of this and starts talking differently, then that's no longer the case. But they're not doing that.
No, they're not.
All right.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I get so mad about this.
No, you didn't cut me off. I'm just saying, I think that's where we're at, which leads me to the next conversation. So now the DNC wants to not have a brokered convention, obviously. You know, Biden is not a popular candidate. I don't think that's a controversial statement. Obviously, people have been pushing, not just elitists and media, other people, voters are saying maybe we should have a different candidate. Like, all of these conversations have been going on. But now they want to have a virtual roll call on this so that it happens before the convention. I think that's going to create a lot more anger out there.
Yeah.
I think, you know, people need to be involved in that are members of the party. And I think doing that that's going to me, you know, sort of come off as being more elitist. So I want to put up really quickly this Axios article. They had the scoop: Biden rebellion resurfaces on Capitol Hill. This had kind of died down before the Trump assassination attempt, right? People had sort of had been arguing about it online, like, should we replace Biden? No, he's our guy. Should we get behind him? We already, you know, had a primary. Yes, we had a primary. My thing is, like, it wasn't really a robust one. There weren't any debates. The DNC wasn't obviously open to the idea of having, you know, people actually run. Like, this is our guy. That's what we're doing. If you want to put your name on a ballot, go ahead. I don't really think that's much of a primary. So there was some anger with some groups over that. so there's all these various voices that are happening out there in the Democratic world, right? The Democratic Party world. But this particular notion, I think, had sort of been dying down a little bit after the Trump assassination. But now it's back. And do you feel like this is happening too behind closed doors? Like, whatnot. Let's bring up the article. I'm going to read through some of it, and then I'll get your opinion on this. So Democratic members of Congress are reviving a fight over President Biden's candidacy following a brief respite in the wake of Saturday's assassination attempt against former President Trump, Axios has learned. Why it matters. Some lawmakers are uneasy about the Democratic National Committee's plans to forge ahead with a virtual roll call vote to nominate Biden weeks before the Democratic convention. People are back to being angry at Biden, and a push to sign on this letter is going around to replace Biden. The Replace Biden movement is back, a House Democrat told Axios. Driving in the news, a letter circulating among congressional Democrats argues that there is no legal justification for an early virtual roll call after Ohio moved its filing deadline past the date of the Democratic convention. We respectfully but empathetically request that you cancel any plans for an accelerated virtual roll call and further refrain from any extraordinary procedures that could be perceived as curtailing legitimate debate, it says. I agree with that, actually. I think I'm not particularly married to either side of this debate. I think people are being ridiculous if they don't acknowledge there's a problem here. I mean, there's a problem, clearly. But I think once you start pushing into this territory, we're back in 2016 where you're just giving you're thumbing your nose at your voters again.
Yep.
And it's just going to make people stay home and not vote. And that is how Trump wins by a landslide. How do they not see this?
I'm so frustrated with this. Like, I tried not to, but of course I got involved in these arguments online and offline because I can't not. But my contention, okay, like you, I'm lukewarm. Like, whatever, just have a fucking candidate. All right, just get your shit together.
Get your shit together.
Yeah,
and whether it's him or not, I mean, fine. But I mean, let's at least, in the very least, acknowledge that there is cognitive decline going on here. That the debate was like really bad. I'm sorry, it was terrible. But it was also bad for Trump. He's also senile. But we'll table that for now.
It's just like, stop.
What is happening here? These are our candidates. Are you kidding me right now? Sorry.
There's a couple of things going on. So a couple of things that really piss me off here. The first thing is, stop processing your shit to the press. Like, get it together, figure something out, and don't fucking anxiety.
Right, that's fair. That's fair.
God, like this is like I have this whole thing where, because I was warning about this stuff, because I talk about this stuff all the time, when people in my life get scared about it, they start processing that fear out on me. So I'll be sitting there on like Saturday night, and then I'll get a bunch of texts going, well, you might as well just call the election because, Biden's going to lose and Trump's going to win. Yeah. And like, we're going to live in fascism now forever. And I'm like, okay, you're telling me that when they're dragging me into the street by my hair to beat me to death, like I've had plenty of people threaten to do, because as a woman and as a Jewish and Romani woman and as a Jewish and Romani woman journalist, who also, goes after the far right and tells them to fuck off and like, has brought several of them down and so on. Like, I'm pretty much top of the list there. And what they're telling me when they give up, preemptively, is basically they're telling me they're not going to fight. They're not going to fight for me. They're not going to try to fight for my
Yeah.
campaign.
Have you met the Democratic Party?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, sorry to make a joke, but let's be honest. Their history of fighting isn't much.
Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Every single, like, I mean, like, if you're going to do this. My thing is, if the right wants you to do something, if the far right, which is the right now, if they want you to do something, if they, whatever it is they're plotting or planning, don't do that, because they obviously have a plan. Right now they're doing the push-pull thing where they're saying Biden should stay and Biden should go, Biden should stay. And that confuses people who haven't been paying attention for the last 10 years. But if you look at their actions and what Back to Heritage is doing, they keep talking about how they're going to make it harder to replace Biden. And so I'm seeing a lot of people who should really know better going, oh, well, they don't want Biden removed. They want him to stay. I'm like, no, they're saying make it harder to replace him, not harder to remove him. They would make it impossible for anybody to replace him, which means there would be no Democratic candidate, which means it would default to the Republican candidate, which means Trump, right? And they're doing it in swing states. Like, come on, don't do what they want. Pay attention. Get your shit together.
No,
like,
it's not good.
Yo, it's fucking terrifying. Having the fact that the Democratic Party is the only thing standing in between us and fascism now, because the press isn't going to protect us, the police aren't going to protect us. I don't think like a lot of Democratic politicians are going to protect us. Like, don't do what they want, you know. And the Republican Party is definitely not going to, because they've just gone whole hog. Like, they just do not care. The stuff that they say is just basically, well, you know, like they'll be, their whole thing is gaslighting in Darvo. Like, ugh.
All right. So I also want to point out before we move on, because I know you have to go soon. This is from Jamie Harrison, which is the chair of the DNC. He said this: the suggestion that the timeline for the virtual roll call has been accelerated is false. The timeline for the virtual roll call process remains on schedule and unchanged from what the DNC made that decision in May. So, you know, this is just Jamie passing the buck again. Who cares that it hasn't been accelerated? The problem isn't that it is or it hasn't been accelerated. The problem that you guys are still going to go through with that instead of letting what play out. You know, and you know, here's on the flip side. I also see some of these crazy pundits out there saying like, life's been so boring and now it's very interesting. I'm like, are you kidding me?
I'm gonna fucking eat those people. I'm going to attack and kill and devour them.
That is so removed from reality. I can't believe they're saying this stuff out loud. But
I mean, I've seen to be a white guy.
I know, right? My thing is like, okay, so like if you think your job is so boring, how about you start covering some of the really important issues that have led us to the place we are in now? Really?
Or just quit immediately and never come back.
Well, there's that.
Please. I do have one more thing to say that's a more general observation that I don't know if it'll give insight, but I feel like it's insightful. Of course, I mean, I sit here by myself thinking, oh, this is an insightful thing. But one of the things that I've really thought about, and I'm seeing a lot of people saying this today, how the Republican Party's authoritarians and fascists in general, you know, their whole thing is abuse. It's emotional abuse, it's physical abuse, it is identical to spousal abuse. The only difference is scale, right? And yeah, that's true. And the other thing is, authoritarians think in binaries. They think in very like strict binaries, and they act in very strict binaries too. I mean, that's like they want everybody to be like that, right? And so those binaries, sort of like that pattern gets you know,
which is problematic.
Replicated. Very. But what has happened politically here is that the Republican Party has effectively they have an idea of masculinity and an idea of femininity, and we all know about it because they won't shut up about it, right? And what they've done is, you know, they've cast women as we're weak. We know we need protection. We need people to think for us. We need to be told. We need to be in the home. We're never happy unless we have children. Like all those things, right? But they've actually like transferred that to the Democratic Party. So the Democratic Party is the woman
that's interesting
in the relationship.
Okay.
And all their rhetoric, it goes to sort of like emphasizing this difference between the two parties. You know, Republican Party is the raw, masculine, muscles.
Like toxic masculinity of hyper at levels. Yeah, you're not wrong on that. That makes sense to me.
We're all the kids in the abusive marriage. And then, you know, the mom who just keeps coming back. Oh, honey, he doesn't really mean it. You know, and then dad's just like, come here, you know, and we have to live this way.
It's ridiculous that we don't have better options in this. I mean, this country is in as far as I'm concerned, this is a dark space. The fact that these are our choices is just absolutely ludicrous. Come on, America, get it together. All right. So in the chat, anybody that has questions, anything, like pop them into the chat now. Obviously, we'll look at your super chats and whatnot. And while you all are thinking about your questions and super chats, whatnot, I do want to put up one more article, just because I thought this was interesting, came out this morning. This is from the Washington Post. Biden allies worry he is not getting complete information about the race. Concern grows among Democrats that he is hearing from a shrinking number of aides. Of course he is. This is called an echo chamber. It's why it allows him to believe that it's going to be an easy win for him when it's clearly not going to be. So Democratic lawmakers and strategists inside the effort to reelect President Biden have grown concerned in recent days that he's listening to a smaller number of aides who are limiting the data he receives. Two Democratic strategists involved in the president's reelection effort said Biden needs to be hearing more directly from the top officials on his own campaign, as well as from his own polling team. Listening to younger, more fresh voices would be helpful. I agree with you there. There are not enough young voices being heard out there in politics, period, end of story. Speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive internal matters. Hang on. Whoopsie. Okay, that's it. What do you think of that? I think that's probably true.
Oh, I think it probably is true, but at the same time, I don't know. It's like these stories coming out. My concern is that the same people who are giving anonymous quotes about the Trump administration and the people who are giving anonymous quotes about the Biden administration to reporters are the same people. Like, they just say it's source.
I mean, there was a time when I would not have laughed at that, but yeah, that's possible now. I mean, 50 years ago, if you were the Washington Post and you were willing to put a source in your paper that was anonymous, you better believe that source was 100% vetted and double backed off from something else. Like, you wouldn't just print it and say, we have an anonymous source, right? I think so many of those, boundaries have been ripped away that anybody feels they can say that now. So just an anonymous source, like it's just not, that's not trusted anymore. You know?
Well, the institutional, this is a whole other discussion, but, as somebody who comes from a journalism family, third generation journalist, I've been working in journalism now for nearly 30 fucking years, 30 years. Ask me about my pension. I'm just kidding. I don't have one.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What pension? What, you have one? No.
No, God, no. I have $3.75 in savings, but like $3.75, not $375. I don't want you thinking I'm rich.
I thought you meant 375,000, girl. What are you talking about?
Oh my God, what would that be like? But yeah, like, all these journalists have been laid off and fired. Just the places they work for have collapsed, and that means journalism has lost its institutional memory. Like, the shit that I say, and I've made this point online, the shit I say only sounds outrageous because people haven't heard shit like this for so long. When I'm just like, you don't ever trust the cops.
Right.
I got that from my grandpa.
Or
right?
The other thing that I think happens is you have papers of record that they say they're still committed to being unbiased, but which is not entirely accurate. What their idea of unbiased is both siding an issue. And you know what? Both siding isn't the same thing as unbiased. I'm sorry, it's not. There are some issues where 1% goes to one side and 99 goes to the other because that's just the reality. And if you can't see that, I don't know what to say. I mean, look at some of the New York Times reporting on trans folks. It's like absolutely insane what they're putting out there.
It's dreadful.
It's dreadful.
It's
just as an example.
It's horrifying just to see how much. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. And I am super sorry because I have got to run.
I know. So give me 2 more minutes, 3 minutes, because we've probably got some super chats and questions. I got to put my glasses on for this.
Yeah, I got mine on too.
I'm getting
my old lady reading glasses.
What do we have, Mr. Colin? All right, there we go. Glad to see Tina back. Yes, thank you. It's good to see you guys back. We miss doing Right Wing Insanity Report. Hopefully one day we'll be able to bring that online. But, money's tight. And in fact, if you want to help bring it back, become a member of Status Coup. The membership fees are what fund the programming, whether that's, John Farina being on the ground, covering all these Palestinian rights protests or Right Wing Insanity Report, whatever else. So please consider that if you can afford it. If you can't, I totally get it. Believe me, it's tough out there. Tony D, miss you, Tony D. Tina the Nazi Whisperer, JD Dorian, JD Vance. It's been a while. Good to see you. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. Teresa, it's been a while since I've seen you too as well. Thank you, beautiful ladies. No, thank you. That is a huge, huge, huge donation. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. We appreciate that. What else we got? Any good questions? Or Teresa, that is so generous. Thank you. Truly. Nope, no questions, Colin? You didn't pull any? All right, I guess it's one of those days. Anyway, so thank you for joining us today on Status Coup. Brooke, thank you for joining me and going over JD Vance and some of these things. Lots to think about. I don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, but it's definitely going to be crazy.
Whatever it is, it's going to be something nobody has predicted. I don't think that any of the pundits know what's going on. I wish they would.
I agree with you. Anyone that says they know what's going to happen is crazy. I mean, on a certain level, I feel like we've blown past so many normalized goalposts the last 5 or 6 years that, some crazy thing happens. I'm like, okay, we're doing that now. Okay, sure we are.
Sure. Yeah.
So I agree with you. I do not have a magic 8 ball that's going to tell me what's going to happen. I don't know.
Yeah, same. And that's the other thing. Like, we can't lose hope now because the future's unwritten, and if we give up preemptively, we'll know what happens. But, if we fight, things might get way better. I'm still holding out hope for that satisfying turnaround for the far better. That's my thing.
Right on. I feel that. Somebody's got to stay positive.
And
all right.
Let's punch all the Nazis and eat the rich.
I love you, Brooke. You crack me up. Thank you for joining me today. Appreciate your time. Everybody else, thank you for turning to Status Coup. We'll be back again tomorrow, and have a good evening.